Hey everybody, I'm REETU KAINULAINEN. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Ultimate.ai, and we help businesses scale their customer service. I know it's getting close to lunch, but don't worry, I'll throw in a few jokes and the time will just fly. So let's start with the history of customer service. So we think that customer service is really normal to us, like it's been around forever. But actually, it's quite a new thing. The guys at the ancient Egypt, they didn't have contact centers or call centers. It was actually in the 60s when there was a new invention in technology called intelligent call routing that boomed and created the call center industry. So instead of having 100 phone numbers and 100 guys answering to individual phone call, you could actually have just one phone number and then hide the people behind that and have a call center to provide customer service. And that was in 1965. The second big switch was the dot-com boom. So now people had emails and internet adoption was growing rapidly. So call centers became contact centers. So now you had calls, but you also had emails, those things we all love. Then the second big change in technology is or was the cloud, so mainly driven by players like Salesforce, and now companies could buy these highly complicated contact center solutions straight from the cloud and just pay a monthly subscription. I'm from Finland, I moved to Germany, and I know there's still a little bit of work in the cloud side, but still it's a growing business. And then in the 2010, 2008, thanks to the guys of Zuckerberg and the WhatsApp guys, we started to have instant messaging as a consumer, like a normal consumer behavior. And that was also added to these lovely, lovely contact centers. And all throughout history, there's more and more channels being added, easier for companies to have call centers or contact centers, and more people being employed there. And actually today, 4% of the employed population of OECD countries actually work in contact centers. That's a huge number. Like, I come from Finland. I think that's over 7 million people in Europe. Finland has only 5 million people. So from the babies to the elders, everybody just works in a call center. But the issue there is that we've been adding new technology, we've been adding new pipes, so it's easier to contact the customer service. But we really haven't changed the way customer service is being supplied. It's still the same guys sitting in the same desk or box, answering your calls, emails, chats, WhatsApps, Facebook Messengers, But we feel that the next big change is going to be an AI-driven models that truly change how the people work within these call centers. Big problems right now, like we heard from Michael earlier. First of all, they're quite costly. Like on average, an average enterprise spends over 50 million every year running their customer service department. And that's just an average. I don't want to even talk about the numbers that Deutsche Telekoms and Bahn spent into call centers. And the complexity is enormous. Like you can imagine not just having the calls, the chats, the emails, the tweets and the WhatsApps, but also having 50 different backend systems that you have to operate and try to find the information as the chat is going on, as the phone call is going on. It's really complex environment. And like I said, it's really labor intensive. So more and more people work in call centers, and like we heard, more and more people quit. Up to 300% annual turnover in staff. That's huge. Like you go around your whole staff, you replace your staff 3 times a year. That's highly inefficient. And what is the outcome? Like, what is your experience usually in customer service? Usually the outcomes are actually quite poor, which is bad for the consumer, but also it's a lot of brand damage from the companies itself. So, how do we solve this problem? Well, not with chatbots, that's for sure. So there's a lot of hype, and still is, in bots and automation. So a lot of companies, I think 2-3 years ago, were born and said, hey, why don't we just deploy a chatbot that uses NLP and have the conversations on behalf of the human? We don't need humans in customer service anymore. In theory and in paper, when you do the ROI calculations, that sounds really nice. But what we have learned is that there's actually a lot of issues in this approach. First of all, they're not that good. The technology is not really conversational. Customer service is still between the two humans and having a relationship with somebody to actually take care of you. And we feel that the bots are just masking a bigger problem. So usually the bots are just a shallow layer somewhere on the corner of your website where the whole call center or contact center is actually struggling behind. So this is what we're doing. So we're building an intelligent backbone for the contact center. So we're going a bit deeper than the bots. So just quickly go through how our solution works. We can talk about later. I can show you some demos later. But we feel like there's 3 pillars of success, being able to solve these issues. First, like Michael said earlier, augmentation. We believe heavily in augmentation. So how our solution works is that we have a deep neural network-based SaaS solution that is integrated to existing contact center solutions like Salesforce, Zendesk, Genesys. Then we train the machine based on historical conversational data like chats or email. And then we start to augment the work of the customer service agent. So now when you send a message to customer service, the agent will get recommended answers from us in real time as they go through the conversation. And when you have 5 to 6 conversations simultaneously, there's always, let's say, a machine helping the agent to reduce complexity and kind of reduce also the stress of how should you handle this case. Then we like feedback loops. So then we can actually just give stuff to the agent, but also receive inputs from the agent. So now when the agent gets the recommended answer, and when the agent uses the answer or modifies the answer, sends the answer, we automatically can feed that back to the algorithm to validate that, yeah, this was actually a good way of handling this case. So we can grow in accuracy without manually having to create training data. And then we can move to automation. Then we can say like, hey, your agents are handling this amount of cases per month, and our recommendations are accurate in these cases, and these are actually super simple. Just the simple questions the customers are asking, we should flick on automation. So now we can seamlessly, slowly and pragmatically move to automation and automate those cases that make sense to automate. And finally, since we classify every single message that comes into customer service, we gain a lot of data on how the whole business is run, basically. So customer service is such a treasure trove of data. Like customers are explaining what are their issues, what is going well, what is going badly, and the agents are talking to them every day. So imagine being able to pull that and give that data to maybe the head of customer service, who can say, oh, these are our most common issues, this is how we handle them, this is how the agents are performing, this is how an individual agent is handling this individual topic versus another one. And then, oh, this is actually a trend happening in our business of one problem we're having that we should communicate back to the, let's say, the product team, that they would fix that problem. And then we can move even a higher level of seeing, okay, which of these conversations lead to a high, let's say, a higher NPS score? Or in a sales-related situation, which of these conversations actually convert better? And then start to optimize on that and recommend more answers to everybody. But there's 3 hard technical problems, hard problems to be able to do that. The first one is Finland, of course. So there was actually a good question about the dialect. We come from Finland, and we got the pleasure to start with one of the hardest languages in the world. And in call centers, when you work with large companies, even if majority of their customer service might be English, still they're global companies and they might serve 10 different languages, 20 different languages, 30 different languages. And you have to scale. So how do you handle complex languages like Finnish? I can give an example. In English, you have a singular and plural form of a word, and that's about it. So almost like a keyword search thing might work. In Finnish, let's say the word store has 2,500 ways the word inflects and changes between in relation to the context. So we didn't want to build manual rules how each one of these grammars or languages work. So of course, a major breakthrough or major advancements in machine learning is deep learning. And this is what we use as a foundation technology in our technology stack. So now we can just give the algorithm a lot of, let's say, a publicly available data, but also the customer-specific data to train the language model that can be highly accurate in languages. Actually, we're just deploying Romania, so we can scale quite nicely. Second is the labeled data, because like I said, in customer service, you have millions or in some cases billions of conversations just as a textual form in a database or somewhere in Zendesk or Salesforce. It's quite hard to grasp what to do with this data. And some, let's say in the past, statistical LDA, unsupervised learning methods hasn't been that good to kind of gain insight from that data. But what we'll build is these clustering algorithms. It's not just one silver bullet, there's a lot of stuff, but that can tap into the historical data and try to semantically separate similar questions and similar answers. And actually a good tip, answers are usually more standardized than the questions, so it's easier to cluster based on answers. So then we try to show the customers like, hey, based on your data, we can find, let's say, here's the 50 most reliable clusters we found for these cases, and this is how your agents are giving the answer, and we can use that as the initial data set to deploy the solution. Second thing is the feedback, or third thing is the feedback loop. So now that we have the initial model, we deploy that, we start recommending answers. When the agents validate those answers and get value and use the answers, then we can grow in accuracy. When they modify those answers, we can add more answers. And then we have this nice feedback loop where we can really quickly show better recommendations. And when we show better recommendations, the agents use more of them, which creates more accurate recommendation. And now we have a nice feedback loop. And this is the core of our whole company. Creating feedback loops inside the process, how customer service works, and then creating, let's say, value-added services like the augmentation or automation or analytics on top of that. Here's just to end this with a few slides. So results. So this is actually one of our earliest customers over a year ago. So we can see a nice trend line of the usage. So this is about 40 agents using the tool. And the more they use the tool, the higher accuracy the tool gets, and then the more they start using that. Actually, nowadays we have users that 96, one of the users just checked last week, 96% of their answers come straight through our recommendations. And that's quite insane almost. Then this is the end result. So when we've created a process, an algorithm that fits into the process and works with the agents, help the agents to answer better and faster, we immediately can cut the response times almost in half. So this is actually one of the airline customers we have. And in month 2, we have almost over halved the response times. And this has a major direct impact on the end customer experience. Like imagine being able to handle your customer service issues double the speed. That feels good. Then the money shot in here is for the business itself. So of course, there needs to be some benefits there for these large corporations to invest in these solutions. So this is a metric we're really obsessed about. So it's how many conversations per hour, let's say, one agent can handle. And actually, this is you can see it's real data because it goes down sometimes. So actually, this is really interesting to see because they started about 7.5 conversations an hour. And when they start to use the tool, there was a change how they have to work, and there was a little bit of learning curve. So it took them a while to get used to of searching just answers, then actually just choosing the answers next to the chat or email. But then when they became used to the tool, it became a status quo for them, and their efficiency went up without them feeling more stressed. Actually, the agents were saying, we had this test group that we kind of took the tool away, they said that they felt slower and they felt a bit more stressed because they couldn't rely on kind of the recommendations. And I feel like it's similar if I'll take away your Google Maps or your Spotify and you have to think, oh, what do I want to listen? It creates tension and friction. So how I want to end this is to basically convey that what we learned for the past 3 years is that all these state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms and deep learning, it's great, and we're investing heavily into those. But that's half of the problem. the biggest innovation comes when you have these technologies and you understand how the process itself works. Like Michael talked earlier, how the call center agent or the sales agent works and what are the problems there and how can you fit these state-of-the-art tools into the daily work. That's when the true innovation happens. So I have a few minutes left with time for Q&A, and then we can all go for lunch. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, REETU. So let's start with the questions. Thomas, I see you. You have to wait for the microphone, sorry.
Thank you. No, thanks a lot for the presentation. I would be interested on actually how your algorithm learns. You know, you gather a lot of data from those conversations, but how actually the learning is accumulated.
Well, on a higher level, it's about just creating. Let's say we have it's a classifier in the end that is in production. The clustering is a different algorithm, but the classifier basically how it learns is that it gets more training data. And how we get more training data, it's a supervised learning problem, so we need somebody to annotate the training data. So instead of manually annotating them, we use the customer service agents while they work. Every time they select the answer, they basically annotate the piece of data. And that's how the, let's say, I don't want to call it self-learning, but active learning happens within the algorithm.
So it's training the supervisors, basically.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say that.
Good, great. Another question? There in the back.
Thank you for the presentation. So I'm a founder and I build and sold companies already, but I have no idea how you got companies to test your product. Because at some point you must have had a not that perfect product, and then you went to some big corporation and said, hey, just go for it. Or how did that work?
Well, like basically like that. So
maybe you should name your customers.
Yeah, well, right now we have over 30 enterprise customers from the Nordics, Germany, UK, Romania soon. Customers like Zalando or Finnair or Telia, large telcos. And well, in the early days, we actually hired our first sales team last December. And everything was just me literally going to the guys and saying, hey, you want to give us your data and we'll do something about it. And that was just before GDPR, so it was still doable. But right now, how we basically just do, we always want to show stuff. We want to be pragmatic. Usually what we say, hey, let's sign an NDA, a DPA, and then send us some data, and then we'll kind of create, let's say, the first version for you guys, and then go forward. Usually, show, don't tell, that works quite well. Cool. But it's hard.
And maybe one thing to add there, can you, because we was talking a lot about feedback loops, and that could be kind of a mode for your company, so strength. What I found very impressive, I think you have onboarding time, or at least time to return on investment or wow for the customer as a KPI. So how fast do people see actually the impact of Ultimate.ai?
Yeah, well, that was one key thing, because like we always think about being an AI-first company, and like it's different than being a SaaS company where you just create an account and that's it. If we would just create an account to our customers and give it to them, it would actually be really disappointing or destructive almost. So you always have to create initial data sets, and that's why we invest still heavily on the clustering part. So we can go, the clustering itself won't take longer than a day, and it will basically comprise of having the initial clusters, and we have somebody going through them, cleaning them a little bit, and doing that in an iterative manner. So we can, in theory, we can do it within a day, deploy it with the customer, then it starts creating the recommendations, learning from the agent, and within the first 30 days, you can immediately see the results and how it's working. And you can actually quite quickly even go to automation, because then some of those cases are so obviously simple that you can, let's say, do the first 5 or 10 automation cases within the first 1 or 2 months.